Sam Itodo joins us this morning. He is Executive Director of YIAGA Africa. He joins us virtually from here in Lagos. Good morning, Mr. Itodo, and thank you so much for joining us.
And thanks for having me.
Well, it's been a minute, and I know that YIAGA is very, very active whenever there is any election. First of all, your general perspective about local government elections generally. We'll talk about Rivers specifically in the coming minutes. One of the things that I have seen is that, and INEC has also validated that, you may also want to speak to it, that the local government elections is the lowest, usually gets the lowest patronage of the people, you know, compared to previous days and previous years, previous local government elections. How do you assess the local government elections in Rivers State compared to the one in Lagos, for instance, or in other parts of the country?
Well, thank you very much. I think, let me reiterate a point that YIAGA Africa has made consistently, is that all the local government elections that held before the Supreme Court judgment and after the Supreme Court judgment were nothing but a travesty of electoral democracy. Those elections, virtually all of them, ran foul of provisions of the law. So in other words, they violated provisions of the Electoral Act. And if you challenge the legality of those elections in court, I doubt if all of them will meet the test. The second point is the local government elections, or what happens at the local government level. It's nothing but electoral coronation. They are not elections because the state electoral commissions are not given the independence to function. Their operational independence is subject to the approval of the governor. If you ask all the chairs of CX across the country, they will tell you and express their ordeal of how it's challenging to access funding to conduct those elections. The second point is the issue related to the tenure of local government councils. And some people believe it's not a settled matter, but the Electoral Act is very clear in Part 6 that talks about the tenure of the officers for the FCT area council, because by virtue of Section 150 of the 2022 Electoral Act, the procedure for the conduct of local government elections are already provided in the Act. And then you look at the quality of the elections. For the most part, whether it's voter accreditation, collation of results, you just see CX writing results, and they are not a reflection of the will of the people. And then the issue related to turnout is also extremely poor because citizens are less interested in what happens at the local government, not because they don't want to participate, but to a large extent, they just feel that it's a sheer waste of time. And that has been the recurring decimal in all the local government elections that have been conducted.
That would be a little concerning because, so on the one hand, when we spoke with the chairman of RISIEC, the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission, one of the things he said, when we raised this issue of other, parties not getting as much patronage during the elections, his opinion was that most of the time, the opposition parties always approach the polls from a defeatist perspective. Do you think that's a patronizing statement, or you think he's actually speaking facts?
I don't think it's speaking facts. You leave opposition parties with no option when a SEC operates as though it's an appendage of the executive. You need to build confidence on the part of the opposition actors. For instance, let's take Kaduna as a classic example. In the build-up to the Kaduna local government elections, all of a sudden, the CX just changed the collation or the resource management procedure in its guidelines. If you look across also in other states, you discover that even the guidelines regulating those elections are unknown, to the actors. For instance, in the Rivers State, in the Rivers elections, which law actually governed the conduct of that election? And these are the things. In Akwa Ibom, you also saw a situation where a particular candidate, a party won, and he was declared the winner by the returning officer. All of a sudden, the results changed. So how do you inspire confidence on the part of the actors What you simply see at the states is the governors see the local government as tools of power and also an arena of asserting their influence. And so they continue to hold the local government councils, to ransom. That's exactly what happens because the governors think that they should have control over local governments, and that this whole financial autonomy has not even made the situation any lighter. And that's why they are exerting their influence to ensure that they capture the entire local government structures. And it's just really unfortunate. So I don't blame the opposition parties. I blame the CX. I also blame the governors for the quality of local democracy at the state level, despite the landmark judgment by the Supreme Court.
Mr. Itodo, you have pointed out quite a number of issues. And these are not things that we're hearing you say for the first time. We've been hearing these complaints about the quality of elections, especially at the local levels, where you would think that the focus on the best elections would be, does come off really disappointing. But in Rivers State, it's a little more complicated with Rivers State. I want to start off with your views on people who believe that the election shouldn't even have held in the first place. How democratic was this process? If a local government election was being held under the supervision of a sole administrator that is also being contested, that situation. And then, of course, the issue about the Electoral Commission head in the state and the legality of these polls in the first place, before we even come to what it is that we saw on the ground during the elections.
Of the Rivers election, because first, that election shouldn't have held. That election is an illegality. It's an expression of, unconstitutionality in every respect. And I say this for two reasons. And I've made this point consistently, that as a country, we need to decide whether we want to be a democracy or we want something else. Because you can't say you are a democracy and you don't respect the rule of law. This weaponization of democratic instruments is totally unacceptable. First, you have a state of emergency rule. It is just unheard of that within the current context, you can conduct elections. Which law governed the election in the first place? Even the State Electoral Commission, does it have the legality and the constitutionality, especially for a matter that is still before the Supreme Court? It's just really unfortunate. I don't think that election, if and only if we want to be true and we want to uphold our laws, then that election shouldn't have held. The second point is the question I've asked consistently. What gives the sole administrator the power to appoint men and women into the State Electoral Commission? For heaven's sake. He is not a democratically elected governor of the state. We are in an emergency situation. And under an emergency situation, you have to wait until the emergency is lifted, and then you allow the democratically elected governor and the State Electoral Commission to proceed with conducting democratically conducted elections. But the current, the development, it's really sad for our constitution. And it's just clear that some individuals, some people who have power, are doing everything to ensure that they capture, the states. I think they have done. And I just weep for our democracy. And I hope that, if this matter is brought before their lordships and the courts, that they are courageous to address this misnomer. Because if you let this stand, we'll be setting a dangerous precedent for our democracy.
It's a very telling statement right there. Before we wrap up with you, I know you say you'd rather not comment on the quality of the election because it shouldn't have held in the first place. But, just maybe a word for the people of Rivers State. One thing that we did hear the ST minister say is that, well, with these local government elections done now, then that means the road is clear for this emergency situation to be removed, and Fubara can be back by the 18th of this month, you know, which is something a lot of people are calling for. People are talking about this like arrangement. Let's see what we can do to sort this local government thing out so that we can move on to our governor coming back, and we can have our democracy, our democratically elected governor back. Maybe a word to the Rivers people about what it is, you know, that has happened and what kind of example it is setting for the future of elections in their state.
I think the only message for the Rivers people is to continue to commend them, you know, for how peaceful they have remained. And people of good conscience in the state should continue to speak against this unconstitutionality and this abuse of the rule of law. Any attempt, you know, to impose undemocratic and very draconian, you know, leadership in that blessed state should be resisted, you know. And I love the fact that the people are speaking out. They should continue to speak. They shouldn't fold their hands and accept this, because what the political actors want to do is to oppress the people to have their way. And as citizens, continue to ask those questions, continue to push back, and if possible, test some of these actions in the court of law. But I really commend them that they have not in any way resorted to violence, because violence does not in any way solve the problem. It will take resilience, consistent advocacy, and pressure, and only then can the powers actually give way.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Samson Itudo, for making all the time to be with us this morning, and good luck with all the work you have ahead of you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.